Over 200 ships per 100 square kilometers and one-third of global trade, all funneled through the South China Sea. This was not random. It was a chain reaction of overlapping claims, Cold War maps, and one legal rule that turned tiny reefs into massive prizes. How did these waters become the most dangerous on Earth? The turning point is not where most people expect. By the end, you will understand exactly how. Every day, more than 200 ships crowd each 100 square kilometers of the South China Sea. They carry goods that keep factories running in China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. The numbers are staggering. About one-third of all global trade by volume, roughly $5 trillion a year, moves through these waters. This is not just a local shortcut. It is the main artery for the world's most vital supply chains. Oil tankers and gas carriers form a constant convoy. Nearly 40% of global petroleum shipments and over a third of all liquefied natural gas cross this corridor. China alone absorbs more than 12 million barrels of oil each day from these lanes, while Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan together import another 6 million. If even a single strait is blocked, more than 60% of East Asia's oil and gas supply is cut off overnight. There is no easy detour. Rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope adds weeks to shipping times and drives up costs for everything from electronics to groceries. Detour. But the CS density is about more than just numbers. Automatic identification system data show a near unbroken wall of vessels, with coverage for over 99% of ships above 300 gross tons. The corridor S traffic is 10 times heavier than alternative routes. If these lanes close, models predict a 15% spike in freight rates in just 24 hours, and global oil prices could jump by as much as 10%. A week-long disruption could erase $85 billion in trade value and force supply chains worldwide to scramble for alternatives. The South China Sea is not just a map of shipping lanes. It is the world's pressure point for trade and energy. And with so much at stake, every move to control or contest these waters carries consequences far beyond the region. The next question: why do so many countries claim overlapping slices of this same sea? And how did those boundaries become so tangled? 6 governments draw their own lines across the South China Sea. China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan each claim slices that often overlap, creating a patchwork of competing maps. China's claim covers the broadest area, anchored by the 9-dash line, a sweeping U-shaped boundary, first drawn by the Republic of China in 1947. This line cuts deep into the maritime zones claimed by its neighbors, reaching hundreds of nautical miles from the Chinese coast and enclosing islands, reefs, and open water alike. Vietnam's maps trace back to French colonial charts from the 1930s, which placed the Paracel and Spratly Islands under Vietnamese administration. The Philippines points to U.S.-era documents and its own 1978 law, which sets its exclusive economic zone around the Kalayaan Island Group and Scarborough Shoal. Malaysia and Brunei rely on British treaties and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, using their continental shelves in 200 nautical mile zones to justify claims reaching into the southern Spratlys. Taiwan, though governed separately from Beijing, mirrors the 9-dash line and asserts control over features like Taiping Island and the Pratas. When these maps are overlaid, the result is a tangle of boundaries, each backed by different historical documents, treaties, and legal interpretations. Colonial-era agreements rarely matched modern coastlines, leaving gaps and overlaps. Post-war cartography, like the 1947 ROC chart and U.S. Navy maps, added new lines without settling old disputes. Today, nearly every reef, rock, and sandbar is claimed by 2 or more parties. The legal and political complexity is not just about lines on paper, it's about who controls the water, the resources below, and the air above. Each map is a claim to fishing grounds, oil and gas fields, and the right to patrol or restrict movement. The next layer in this contest is how international law tries, and often fails, to untangle these overlapping claims. International law draws a sharp line between what counts as an island a rock, or a low tide elevation. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, lays out the rules. According to Article 121, a naturally formed land area that stays above water at high tide is an island. If that island can support human habitation or economic life, it grants its owner a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, EEZ. That is a zone where the state controls fishing, oil, gas, and other resources. But if the feature is just a rock unable to support people or an economy, it only gets a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. And if it is only visible at low tide, it gets nothing at all. This is why tiny remote specks of land have become the center of global attention. A reef or sandbar that barely breaks the surface can, if classified as an island, multiply a nation's maritime reach overnight. For example, a single outcrop in the Spratlys, if recognized as an island, could let a country claim a resource zone the size of a small European nation. But most features in the South China Sea are barren, often submerged at high tide, and cannot sustain life. That makes their legal status fiercely contested. The stakes are enormous. Whoever controls a qualifying island can claim not just the land, but also the sea and seabed around it, potentially overlapping the claims of several neighbors. This legal multiplier effect explains the rush to occupy, build on, or even artificially expand these features. It also sets the stage for the next phase, transforming reefs and rocks into outposts with runways, harbors, and radar, all aimed at turning legal theory into physical control. In less than 5 years, the South China Sea's geography was rewritten by dredgers and concrete. On Fiery Cross Reef alone, crews moved enough sand to create a platform spanning nearly 200 hectares, an area larger than many small towns. Where waves once broke over shallow coral, a 3-kilometer airstrip now stretches the length of the new island. That runway can handle military jets and large transport planes, while adjacent piers allow naval vessels to dock and resupply. These outposts are not isolated. Subi Reef and Mischief Reef followed the same blueprint. Hundreds of acres reclaimed, runways laid, radar domes and missile batteries installed. The scale is staggering. Satellite analysis counts over 100 million cubic meters of sand and rock pumped atop submerged reefs across the Spratlys. This transformation is not just about territory. Beneath these artificial islands lie some of the world's most coveted resources. Geological surveys estimate the South China Sea basin holds between 11 and 15 billion barrels of recoverable oil, along with vast fields of natural gas. Control over a single feature can mean access to energy reserves worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The rush to build is driven by more than sovereignty. It is a contest for the seabed's wealth. As sand hardens into runways and piers, legal arguments meet physical reality. Whoever holds the island holds the advantage, and every new structure raises the stakes for the entire region. In July 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague delivered a ruling that sent shockwaves through the region. The tribunal said the so-called 9-dash line has no basis in international law. With this decision, the court rejected China's claim to historic rights over nearly the entire South China Sea. The award also clarified that none of the features China occupies in the Spratly Islands qualify as islands that can generate exclusive economic zones. Most are classified as rocks or low-tide elevations, granting far smaller maritime rights under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. China dismissed the ruling outright, calling it invalid and refusing to participate or comply. The legal clarity, however, did not translate into real-world change. No international enforcement mechanism exists to back the tribunal's findings. As a result, the legal victory for the Philippines, and by extension other claimants, remained largely symbolic. Diplomatic efforts to manage the fallout have stalled. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, known as ASEAN, has spent more than 2 decades negotiating a code of conduct for the South China Sea, but progress remains elusive. Member states are divided, with Vietnam and the Philippines pushing for a binding agreement with teeth, while Cambodia and Laos favor softer language that aligns more closely with Beijing's interests. The latest draft, circulated in 2023, still lacks clear enforcement provisions. This diplomatic gap leaves the region without a robust crisis management tool, even as tensions simmer on the water. The absence of effective enforcement or consensus means that despite a landmark legal ruling, the risk of confrontation remains high. United States Navy destroyers and Chinese warships now cross paths in the South China Sea almost every month. Freedom of navigation operations, known as FONOPS, have become routine. On average, the United States conducts between 12 and 15 of these operations each year, deliberately sailing within 12 nautical miles of contested reefs or artificial islands. Each maneuver is tracked, challenged, and sometimes shadowed by Chinese vessels. Radio warnings, close passes, and even radar locks have become part of the script. No shots are fired, but each encounter increases the odds of a miscalculation. Military analysts warn that in such close quarters, a misread signal or a sudden maneuver could trigger a collision or even an exchange of fire. The risk is not just military. Economic modelers have mapped out the consequences of a serious incident. If the shipping lanes close for even a week, whether from a standoff, blockade, or accident, global oil prices would likely spike by $5 to $8 per barrel. Freight rates would soar. The world economy could lose about 0.6% of its GDP, a hit measured in hundreds of billions of dollars. These numbers are not theoretical. The 2024 RAND scenario shows how a single week of disruption forces ships to reroute thousands of kilometers, stranding goods, raising costs, and sending shockwaves through supply chains from Los Angeles to Rotterdam. In a sea crowded with rival navies, the risk of a local incident spiraling into a global crisis is not just possible, it is modeled, measured, and taken seriously by planners on every continent. Right now, every maneuver in these waters ripples through global trade, security, and energy flows. As rivalries intensify and legal lines blur, even minor incidents risk spiraling into international crises. The balance here shapes the world beyond any single coastline. The stakes are global, and they are unfolding in real time.